Hi everyone, sorry about that, just getting ourselves organised. As mentioned, my name's Monina, I'm the Biodiversity Manager at Glenelg Golf Club, and yes, it's a little bit weird to have a Biodiversity Manager at a golf club, but I'm going to speak about what we're doing at our course. Firstly, we'll talk a little bit about biodiversity. Biodiversity is the shortened version of biological diversity, and it refers to the diversity of all living things and the ecosystems that they create. So why is it important? Well, it can be described as a web of life, and if you think about a spider web, and each part of the web is needed for the web to stay functioning, and pollinators are also incredibly important to our food security. So if you think about the food that you eat, 1 out of 3 mouthfuls so it can be described as a web of life, as we've mentioned. So pollinators are crucial to plants, but they're also crucial to our food security. So if you think about the food that you eat, 1 out of 3 mouthfuls has had a pollinator responsible for pollinating that food. So pollinators need a variety of pollen sources, a variety of nectar sources, because the variety of food is good for them and helps to keep them healthy, I guess. When you look at things like the varroa mite that's all around Australia with the European honeybees, the varroa mite has caused a lot of destruction around the place, causing a lot of European honeybees hives to fail. Sorry, I'm going well this morning. But we're really lucky in Australia because we have native pollinators. So we have like 1,500 bee species here in Australia. So our native bees do a lot of pollination, but you've also got other things like butterflies and moths and birds that do pollination as well. So talking mainly about what we're doing at a golf course, but it does apply to other open spaces. So when you think about urban areas and you think about how house spaces, when houses being built, there's less and less garden area. So smaller gardens mean less availability of food for pollinators. Also means you've got less insect life, birds and other animals rely on insects. So that whole web is starting to break down. So when you look at places like golf courses and large green spaces, they provide habitat for all our fauna, and our golf courses, quite amazingly, are providing a lot of refuge for local fauna and also for our Indigenous plant species. So as I mentioned before, a variety of flowers leads to a variety of pollen and nectar sources for insects and birds. On our golf courses in Adelaide, a lot of the remnant vegetation, Indigenous vegetation, remains. So when you look at all of the residential development that's happened around the place, a lot of the Indigenous plants have been lost. So there are some beach spaces where there are Indigenous plants, and there's also some council reserves where there are Indigenous plants, but many golf courses do still house Indigenous plants that can't be found anywhere else in the Adelaide Plains. So you look at Grange Golf Course, they have the greenwood orchid, and that orchid is being translocated to other spaces like the Torrens Island so that it can ensure that that species survives. If you have any questions, please let me know. So this is some heat mapping undertaken by Resilient West. It's part of a project that all of the councils have been doing to map our urban areas and find out where the hotter areas are and where the cooler areas are. So you can see from this map, obviously the blue spots are the cooler spaces, the red spots are the hotter spaces, and our golf course is, I don't have a pointer, so I'm just going to rush over. So that bit I pointed out just there is the airport. So our golf course is south of that airport. You can see a bit of a blue blob. On the other side of the airport is Adelaide Shores, and on the northern side of the airport is Kionga. So you can see that those green spaces are large green spaces, but they're also helping to cool the urban environment. And then you have a lot of other blue dots. So you've obviously got the water courses, but a lot of other blue spaces that are your green spaces that are providing cooling to the urban environment. It's been great for us to do all the biodiversity projects that we've done. It's given us a lot of publicity locally, internationally and nationally. And it also shows how important it is to have green spaces in the urban environment. So Our course has 9 conservation rated plants, which isn't like a huge amount compared to some other golf courses, but we're working on increasing those plants. We have planted over 5,000 plants over the last 4 years and 35 plants of conservation rated status. There's a fantastic photo taken by Pete Richardson from City of West Orange. Shout out to West Orange for here today. So we've had bird surveys, quarterly bird surveys over 32 years, which have found 93 bird species, and we're recently involved in an insect survey across 5 sites in Adelaide, 2 golf courses and 3 remnant sites, and 344 insect species were found at our course. It was the lowest of all of the surveys, but still people say that there's so much spraying that happens in golf courses that it's a really dead space, but finding 354 different insect species, 74 which were unique to our course, shows that we're obviously very targeted in our spraying. There were 5 microbat species that were found at our course during a 3-season microbat survey, including 2 microbats that don't often visit the course. that don't often visit the Adelaide Plains. One of the things we're doing at Glenelg Golf is a course enhancement project. So we're changing our holes, which means that we're kind of reshaping our fairways and our tees and our greens. And as part of this, it's opened up the opportunity for us to introduce naturalised roughs. So normally roughs at a golf course would be an area that's not maintained a lot, just mowing would probably be most of the work that's been done there. But with a naturalised rough, it gives us the opportunity to increase a variety of plantings that we have and to have more colour. We did have some problems introducing this idea with members, but I think once they saw it, they kind of got it a bit better. In the corner here, you'll see a United Nations Sustainable Goals graphic. We recently applied for a National Banksia Award, and we had to align our work with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So that just gives you a prompt as to how that relates to UN Sustainable Development Goals. So this is an example of the photo of the naturalised rough that I just showed. So this is between our 14th and 18th. So this is the largest naturalised rough area that we have. And as you can see, it meets with a watercourse there. So the water table level of this area is quite high, which means we don't have to do any watering. But then it does also mean that there is some maintenance. So some naturalised roughs in a drier area won't need a lot of maintenance, but given that this is a wetter area, we still have some weed issues. We, a couple of years ago, when David Spears was Environment Minister, received a $94,000 XGST grant to do a habitat connectivity project with 3 other golf courses. So this is the first time in Australia that 4 golf courses have worked together to apply for a grant, but also to do something of this magnitude. So the idea is that we'll try to create habitat connectivity between our courses, but also connect pockets of habitat within our courses. So sometimes you can have issues where you have habitat maybe on the outside or in the middle of your green space or golf course, and it's hard sometimes for birds to move between without getting attacked by larger birds, smaller birds, to not get attacked by larger birds. So if you can create some kind of corridors, it really helps the birds move. We have thornbills that visit our course from West Beach, so they come up through Adelaide Shores and along James Melrose Road and then onto our course. So anything that we can do to increase that habitat for those smaller bird species, which also includes superb blue wrens, by the way, superb fairy wrens, which is pretty amazing to see them on the Adelaide Plains. So as part of the grant, we'll be planting, That's all right. As part of the grant, we'll be planting approximately 18,000 plants, and we've tried to make it broader than just plants by providing educational workshops for our staff and for the other golf course staff. So we're also doing a plant preservation project, which means that we're looking at the Indigenous plant material at all of the courses and swapping them between the courses so that we can have backup populations in case of accidental spraying, which is something that often happens. And despite what we try and do as veg people, we do often get accidental spraying. I'm not sure it's all accidental, but anyway. I think plant ID is quite important when you do have people that go out spraying, and luckily we've got 2 people on our veg team that do most of the spraying. So since they've started doing most of the spraying and not the greenkeeper spraying, we have been able to sort of control where they're spraying and control what they're spraying. Because some native plants can look a bit weedy, and that's why we've had to do a lot of work to re-establish our plants, because we've had a lot of spraying over the years, and now we're starting to develop more of a seed bank of native plants. So yeah, that idea is really important. Anyway, sorry, the grant also will include a greenhouse for 3 of the clubs as part of our growing plants for the plant preservation project, and fox control, because as some of you may know, foxes are a real problem. Given that we're near the airport, we have a feeling that they live at the airport and then move across to our courses. When Tim and I must say I've done this work, Tim, Warren and I, the superintendent, have done this work together. We had a clubhouse that was just full of poas, like it was just poa city, like back to back poas, and you can still see a few on the outer edge of this photo here. We had to have a loader to take them out because there were just so many of them, they were so big. So we tried to create more of a coastal feel to the gardens, because we've got that coastal planting theme throughout our course. We're on a sandy course, so that lends itself to that coastal planting scheme. And they are a majority, like I'd say 99% Indigenous plants. There might be a few ring-ins there in the clubhouse in terms of trying to get more colour for the ladies. We often complain about not enough colour. But as I say, grey's a colour, so we're getting that contrast with grey and green. We also have a managed aquifer on the course. They also have one at Grange and Royal Adelaide. So this is quite an unusual thing apparently internationally for golf courses to have a managed aquifer. Overseas, I've heard in the US there's a lot of potable water, a lot of drinking water that's used to water golf courses. So we pump from Brown Hill Creek, because we're near the airport. This is fairly obvious, but because we're near the airport, we are level with sea level at some parts of our course, and even below sea level at some points. We've also got one of the highest dunes on the Adelaide Plains at 23 metres above sea level. So in a high rain event, or a high rainfall event, when the Brown Hill Creek is running really fast, it can tend to overflood and will flood the airport. So Tim Warren has had phone calls before from the airport saying, can you start pumping? Because we're about to drown. So we pump from the Brown Hill Creek, and that water gets filtered through our ponds and then injected into our aquifer, which we then bring up for watering. Tim has also negotiated a 15 megalitre contract for the Glenelg Adelaide pipeline water, so we can use that water in case we don't have enough water from our aquifer. During our course enhancement, this isn't an advertisement, but it's kind of the way it's going with Waterpro. With Waterpro have actually redesigned our irrigation, and irrigation improvements have led to less water use already. We're only 6 holes down of an 18-hole renovation, and if you can get your irrigation right, spraying into the right areas, not spraying into your vegetated areas, that does save a lot of work in terms of weed management. We've also been trying organic fertilisers. We've got 10 watercourses at our golf course, so trying to work out ways to reduce any pollutants that are going into the watercourses. We work with local men's shed to create plastic tea collection boxes, or just wooden teas as well. So when people tee off, sometimes the little teas that they put in get broken and they sit on top of the tee where people hit off. So there's a little box and they can put broken tees in there, and that reduces them flowing into the watercourses, but it also reduces any damage on the mower blades as the mowers go over those tees. I've put this picture here of a white-faced herring that we often see in our watercourse, and down here is one of the yabbies, because they're often fishing for little fish, yabbies and frogs. So as I mentioned, there was an insect survey done over 6 sites in Adelaide. This was Green Adelaide Grassroots Grant. Alex Stolarski from EntoSearch was the one who conducted the survey. He did 6 surveys where he put out sort of buckets with solution, and then the insects fly into those solutions, and then he collected what was thousands and thousands of insect species and then classified them all into the different genera. This here, I called it a glitter bug. It's a predatory wasp. I was thinking that he'd just gone to Cheapest Chips and bought some insect and covered it in glitter, but that is actually what it looks like. A predatory wasp that was found at Glenelg Golf Club, and there was also one found at Tennyson Dunes, the only 2 of that type of wasp found during the survey. There were 9 dragonflies found during the dragonflies and damselflies flies found during the survey, and 7 of those were found at the Glenelg Golf Club. As I mentioned, the Microbats survey, so the little forest bat is one of the bats that's not often seen on the Adelaide Plains, but was recorded with this Anabat device. So this device basically just went in a tree over 3 seasons and just recorded all the bat sounds, and then a guy who was funded by Green Adelaide, someone from the uni, had to go through thousands and thousands of calls and determine what was what, which sounds like a terrible job. There's another photo from Pete Richardson at City of West Torrens. So as I mentioned, quarterly surveys, continuous quarterly surveys over 32 years from Penny Payton, and that's been really great for us just to see what's visiting the course. Some members have also told me what they've seen around. We have one member who's a duck shooter, and I didn't know this, but duck shooters are very good at identifying old birds very quickly, and especially flying birds, which is kind of obvious when you think about it. But he's very good in spotting birds. So he will tell me, there's a redneck stint. So there's a podcast that I spoke about in this, the redneck stint, and they fly from the Coorong to Siberia every year, and also other parts of Australia as well. But occasionally you can see them in our course sitting, having a rest, because obviously that's a long way to fly. We conducted what we think is the world's first golf course degustation dinner. So we had plants harvested from our course, and then Andrew Felke, who's a native food chef and member at Glenelg, planned the menu and cooked them all up. So this is an example of lemongrass panna cotta that we served at the dinner. And the GEO Foundation is an international sustainable golf foundation, and in 2020, this was voted as the international community highlight of the year. We've been working with Green Adelaide on rewilding the yellowish sedge skipper. I don't know whether anyone's heard about this. This butterfly was last seen in 1985 at the Adelaide Airport, and we're across from the Adelaide Airport. So we've been working on planting Garnia phyllum, chaffy sausage, which is its habitat plant. We've been working on introducing that to our course to try and increase our habitat, and working with City of West Torrens to plant on our verge as well. Royal Adelaide do have some remnant Garnia, and we've done some releases there of butterflies and caterpillars, and there is evidence that the butterfly is starting to breed there. So this is a 20-year project from Green Adelaide. They've released butterflies down south and also north at Greenfields, and south at Onkaparinga. So it's quite incredibly exciting to be involved in the project and to see that there's actually evidence of breeding. So there'll be more releases to come. We're also working on releasing the bitterbush blue butterfly, which is on the Adriana. So we need to plant more of that habitat. So we're looking at doing a release of that that caterpillar as well. So sometimes there are caterpillar releases, sometimes butterfly releases. We're now in talks with the Nature Glenelg Trust to introduce the purple spotted gudgeon. I know it doesn't look great, like out of the water, but this is a rare fish that is now breeding at City of Marion. So City of Marion have an aquifer storage recovery system. They have the purple spotted gudgeon, which is just breeding like crazy. They said, do you want some? And I said, yes. I thought I'd just go down there with a bucket and pick them up, but apparently there's a lot more to it than that. We have to have a lot of water assessments, water quality assessments, as well as assessments of what fish is currently in our watercourses, so no carp. And the Nature Glenelg Trust are looking for novel wetlands around Adelaide, so if you do have any wetlands that you could potentially add to the study. They said in a presentation recently that they thought that there were 50 novel wetlands in Adelaide, and I thought there's got to be more than that because there's at least 14 or 15 that I can think of at the golf courses. And City of Salisbury told me that they had close to 70. So there's a lot of wetlands around that they can use for potential introduction. So the water has to be fully contained on your property in that it doesn't flow off elsewhere. And it's not just the purple spotted gudgeon, sorry, there are lots of different freshwater fish that they're looking to introduce all around Adelaide. I think there's about 10. With Green Adelaide and the SA Seed Conservation Centre, we introduced this plant, which is, when I'm talking, this isn't locally indigenous to Glenelg, but it is quite a rare plant. It's an Illyria passeroides, subspecies glittassens, I think. This was grown by the Seed Conservation Centre. So if you haven't heard about them, South Australian Seed Conservation Centre do a lot of great work in protecting Indigenous plants. They go all over South Australia, protect seeds, get cuttings, and try and increase the numbers of plants that are dwindling. They also send seeds over to Kew as part of the Millennium Seed Bank, so that those seeds can be protected forever. We planted a whole heap of these on our course. They went absolutely gangbusters, and it turns out because their clones are not actually producing seed. So it's a little bit disappointing, but hopefully we can get some others. This one's not really a formal partnership. This is a friend and I noticed that this checkered swallowtail was visiting Adelaide during an unusually warm period because they like it when it's a bit more humid. We noticed that some of the caterpillars were being predated, so we rescued them, raised them at home, and then released them back at the golf course. And this is Matt Endicott from Green Adelaide, who's our local coastals officer, and he's since found more to raise at home. Social media has just been incredible for us. When I first said to the boss I was going to start posting photos, he was like, yeah, all right, whatever. And we just thought, yeah, whatever. But through regular Wildlife Wednesday posts, through tagging lots of people, we've ended up getting a lot of really good connections with people around the world and also within South Australia. This is how we became mates with David Spears when he was Minister for Environment. I noticed he was active on social media. I just sent him a message and said, hey, do you want to come to our Native Foods dinner? And he said, sure, for Deputy Premier, and it was impossible to get into his diary. So David Spears turned up and gave a killer speech on urban biodiversity and golf courses, and I wish we'd recorded it because it was so good. My boss loves listening to golfing podcasts, and he's even got me onto it sometimes as well. And this gave him an idea to use QR codes. So we use QR codes for pre-start checks for all of our vehicles, and this is translated into QR codes on our golf course so that members can learn about a certain rule, because if you don't know, there are a bajillion rules in golf and people don't always know the rules, so this is a really handy way for people to learn the rules. If you want to learn more about what we're doing, you can scan this QR code because we're QR code crazy. And then we could distribute that link later on as well. Does anyone have any questions?
I love the QR codes.
Yeah, I know. That's so good. Yeah.
I remember, do you still do burn-offs?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I haven't mentioned this, but yes, we had been experimenting with controlled burn-offs. So one of the reasons was just to reduce biomass and reduce costs in terms of green waste costs. But it's also a good way just to refresh plants, to kill off weeds. It's also super fun.
Do you have help from local departments?
No, so just let it go, really. And we, Tim Warren came up with the idea to buy a drip torch, and the drip torch has been quite a good way to do it. It's also really good for the yellowish sedge skipper. So they did an introduction of the sedge skipper at Onkaparinga, and someone threw a firework into the vegetated area, and everyone was really worried, oh God, it's completely stuffed everything up. But it actually improved the success of the sedge skipper because it freshened up the foliage. So it was more keen to lay its eggs on the fresh foliage. So that's another reason why we're doing controlled burning. But it's mainly not because it's fun, but because it's good to reduce biomass. Yeah, Kate.
So I've been joking with at work about doing burn-offs or cleaning up native grasses, because we obviously don't have kangaroos. Do the work for them. Is it something that could be like put into being used within a very urban area, like we've got the lowest green space, so we don't have big areas just to let burn go through. But
and I reckon it could be done, definitely. I guess down at City Coringa, they did it with the Indigenous landowners, and so they were showing them how to do a proper controlled burn, which we've actually been thinking of doing as well. But there is definitely potential to do that. I think the only problem you might have is just residents.
And the irrigation.
Irrigation
under certain areas.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but you can do. I have actually done like individual burns of plants, like when you look at something like a poa.
Yeah.
I was going to say I sound anti-poa. Yeah, so I sound anti-poa, but I have done individual burns of the poa, and within a week and a half they bounce back. And it's a really good way to get rid of all that dead crap on the top, because they do just look really dead.
I'll talk to you later.
Yeah. All right. In terms of controlled burns, we're lucky because we're on private land. So the council have told us that we can just burn to our heart's content. Because we're near the airport, we do need to notify the airport. And we also do need to notify the emergency services, because one time I rang up the control board in the morning and said we're doing a burn, and there must have been a miscommunication, and it was a bit smoky that day, and next thing a fire engine and some cops some cops turned up because they were getting a coffee nearby. So my boss is nodding, that's what the story was. Some cops were getting a coffee on Tapley's Hill Road, and they were like, what's that burning, and turned up to our course. But we had notified them, so no questions?
If anyone does have questions, is that on? We've obviously got another 10 minutes before our break, so if you've got questions, by all means, take advantage of this opportunity. No one? I was curious. You were talking about the surveys.
Yeah.
Is that something? I think you said every 3 months that you're doing those surveys.
Oh, the bird surveys.
The bird surveys. Are the bug surveys?
The bug surveys was a Green Adelaide Grassroots grant project. So that was a project that he put forward and got funding for a 6-month survey. So it was only 6 months, but he reckons he could do it again, because there's a whole section of bugs and insects that he didn't get, because he said like nighttime ones, he'd need like a light to attract the ones that fly at night. And then we didn't have any luck with the ground species, because we had carpets down, but he reckons the geckos just went under and ate everything, because we never found anything. Like he found a centipede and a few ants on our course.
So that information, what do you do with it? Like, would you look to then see if there's increases and decreases, and then take action to make change?
He has told us. The report hasn't been released yet, but he has told us certain sections where there's more diversity. So I guess they're the areas where we're going to try to kind of keep, or try and add more plants to kind of increase that biodiversity. So I don't think I mentioned, but when you've got more insects, then you have more birds, and then you have more microbats. So obviously we have that diversity that the microbats are feeding at our course at night time. And we also have things like a bee-book owl feeding on worms and whatever. So we are trying where we can. And then I guess you can set up no spray zones, because there would be areas in our rough or wherever that we don't spray anyway, but then we can actually just say no one sprays around here because it's a diverse insect diverse area or something. Yeah.
Has that been a challenge? Obviously, golf courses could be guilty of being very aggressive with chemical treatments, and obviously open spaces as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got a very supportive and intelligent leader sitting at the back.
Yeah, exactly.
Has it been a challenge getting the team to adopt everything? Like, have you had to fight to protect your biodiversity?
Well, since Tim's been in there, we've basically rebuilt the team because there's been a bit of attrition with people leaving and whatever. And we have been able to set up more of a culture where people can ask before they spray. So there have been a few times where people have got on the radio and they said, "Oh, Monina, can you come and identify this for me before I spray?" So that's the kind of behaviour that you want. And like with us at a golf course, it's easy because we're close. When you're a council, it's a bit harder because you're so spread out. But you know, even if, so I've had people just send me a photo before saying, "What's this?" And then at least you can say, "Don't spray that," or "Don't spray in that area because there's this and that." So what we're trying to do is set up some mapping, and then you can have certain areas where, you know, no spray here or hand weed only or whatever. So yeah, it can be a challenge at times. But that point that you mentioned about, you know, because we are accused, lots of people have said to me, "Why would you go and work at a golf course?" Which is sorry, by the way, that was my question to Tim Warren when he asked me to work with him. Why would I want to work at a golf course? It's a fantastic place to work in terms of the biodiversity. But when you look at spraying is an issue in some ways because, you know, you do have errant spraying. But chemical can be expensive. So we're quite targeted in where we use it. So we're not just going to like blanket spray everything, which is what people said with that degustation dinner, that they didn't want to attend because they're worried all the food would have poison on it. Like, firstly, we're going to wash it first. But secondly, we're not just spraying everywhere. We're just very targeted in where we spray. So it's more about, I guess, getting people to know where they can and can't spray. Yeah.
And you mentioned you trialling organic fertilisers. Are they liquids or granular or a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of both, Tim. Yeah.
And mainly on fairways, or and you're finding that you're getting good results?
Yeah, our fairway's looking amazing at the moment.
We've obviously got Jeffries here who specialises in soils and composting, and I remember doing a podcast with Pete from Pete's Soils, and he was talking about the benefits of organics in the soils. Is probably not being acknowledged or recognised enough. Yeah. It's just, I guess, and I think that's the human condition, to try and, rather than doing hard work to get it right, you just throw the chemical on there and it's done quickly. Yeah.
So I recently did a roadshow with Syngenta, and they had John Kaminsky talking from Penn State in America, and he was talking about how they've got a plot near them that they've had for 14 years, that the microbial activity under the soil is so incredibly healthy that they can't do anything to the turf to damage it. He said they've been rolling it 20 times a day, they've been walking on it, they've been doing all sorts of stuff, but they can't damage it because it's just so healthy under the ground. And he said if he could produce something to make that happen, he'd make a fortune, but you can't. But it's over time, I guess, that you can't just do an immediate spray over and there are my microbes. It's like a building up the organic matter over time.
Yeah, so it actually takes work.
Yeah, it takes work, It doesn't just like spray it and then happy days,
If there was, I guess, the individuals here that are trying to fight the sustainability fight inside council, and they were coming up against, old school attitudes or having trouble, what advice would you give them? Like, how have you had to tackle that?
Yeah, so this has been a battle that Tim Warren has mainly fought because he has to deal with committee and the members. But I guess the one thing that we've been trying to look at is that some of the stuff that we're doing, like, it's interesting and it just sounds like, what's the point to all of it other than having a few extra birds? Because there was a quote at our course at one point of the birds and bees don't pay the fees. But if you think about it, you've got to think about this long term. So we're creating a more sustainable environment for our future members. So it's making a more economic and environmentally sustainable course or open spaces, because you think costs for everything are going up already. So if you can do something to reduce your costs through integrated pest management, or not spraying certain areas, or not watering certain areas, then you're starting to reduce your costs. And it's going to be, budgets are going to get tighter and tighter. So if you can do stuff that helps the environment, but also helps your budget, then that's what we promote it as. And
It's interesting because the golf courses that probably need to do that the most are the ones that probably don't have a budget to hire someone like you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for them, for
Yeah.
I guess for councils that haven't got a
Yeah.
budget for it, or golf
Yeah.
courses that don't, what would be the the first easy steps that to try
Yeah.
and that
So-
don't cost a lot?
Yeah. So the stuff that I'm talking about, this is Tim and I working on this for 5 years. Like, this has been a lot of work to get where we are now. But you can start small by just planting some Indigenous plants, putting in a bee hotel, putting in some bird boxes, getting local volunteers to help out with things. Like, there are ways to do it and just start small. But what I'd say is, because someone asked me this at a Perth conference from the WA turf industry, they said, how are we going to get more biodiversity in our open spaces like our parks and whatever? And I thought, I said, no piece of grass exists by itself without some buffer between it and the road or the car park or wherever. So wherever you have that vegetation, you have the opportunity to do something. So if it's planting some shrubs, planting some native flowers, finding some wildflowers, putting in a little bee hotel, like everyone has the opportunity to start small and do something. Because I think if we all do something small, then all those bits will lead on to more and create more biodiversity. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Has anyone thought of a question while I've been pumping out my questions? All right. Well, thank you so much.
No worries.
I know,
Thanks.
obviously, as I said at the start, our speakers are volunteers, but they're also, in a lot of cases, employees. So thank you to Tim for being here as well, and to Glenelg for allowing you to be here. We've just got a gift here for you. Mr. Adam Mudge.
Do I have to share it with Tim? Or?
Nope.
No.
Just take it, yeah.
Thank you.
Will Tim share it with you?
Great. I don't know.